Welcome back to the Revolution of Being, everybody. We are diving into a topic that is so important and is affecting so many people right now, which is healing. Whether you're going through autoimmunity, you've had chronically high stress, anxiety, cancer even, there's so many chronic illnesses that are affecting people right now. And, if you've listened to our podcast for any time, Jessica and I have had our own healing journey. And what we never got when we were on our healing journey was anybody who actually broke down what they did and how to simplify the process. So we thought it would be really helpful to dive into both what we were experiencing that led to the diagnoses we had and kind of some of the symptoms, as well as the journey we had, and then also end with what we would do differently. Like, with hindsight being what it is, how would we have simplified the process and probably saved ourselves tens of thousands of dollars and a lot of time? So, to jump off, Jess, you and I talk about your healing journey because you have been such a great mentor for me on my own journey. So, I'd love for the listeners to hear about kind of what you went through, because I know it's been a while since you've been on this journey. And your journey kind of started back before even this whole biohacking and like holistic wellness wave hit. So, you were kind of the OG of really having to figure out healing at root cause in a time where this really was not as big as it is now. So I'd love you just to kind of talk about your journey, if that's all right.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I feel like I was doing this way before it was cool to do it. It was just horrible and weird. That's kind of how I felt. Um, I'm going to go just all the way back. I just want to say that as a child, I had a lot of issues. I had an obstructed bowel when I was 5 years old nearly killed me. They didn't know if my appendix burst or what had happened, but my whole body went into shock. So that's my earliest memory, honestly, being like 4 or 5 years old and having that happen. But it seems like everything after that, it was just this snowball of different health issues. So starting with that, um, I would get a lot of cold sores as a child, which kind of interesting. Like I do remember seeing like pictures, always predominantly on the right side of my body, kind of interesting.
Mhm.
And then as I got older, I had just like a mystery illness in fourth grade. I was about 10 years old and they thought I had mononucleosis. However, like I had some of the markers, like the very elevated white blood count, and then some that didn't follow suit, but it was like a month long journey that led up to me having a full tonsillectomy and then my adenoids removed as well because they swelled up so big I couldn't breathe. Fast forward, after that, I had severe sinus infections that just it felt like it was all the time. So my entire face, the right side, would swell up because my sinuses were so impacted. I mean, absolutely miserable. This is my childhood. And then it went into like lesions on my skin, and then when I was 19 years old I had my gallbladder out. I had my first pregnancy at 22 is when I delivered. I had preeclampsia. I was on bed rest at 5 months. I gained about 30 pounds of fluid in about 4 weeks. It was significant. And then my second pregnancy, I had the same thing happen. It just was a little more delayed. So it happened in about the seventh month. And so I had all these things happening, plus mental health issues. I struggled with my weight a ton, and I was the girl who ran, and I tried everything. Like if there's anything anybody ever wants to know about, I've done it all. I've literally done it all. I can't think of one thing I haven't done. And and then I hit, about 25 years old. I had my second child, and after my first, I was able to lose the weight. But after my second, I was in bad shape. This is when I started to really kind of come online. So I was about 25 years old. And I remember being about 6 weeks postpartum. I was struggling. I honestly thought it was postpartum depression. I had lost like 25 pounds in a month. I was really excited about that, but I felt really, really bad. And I was very shaky and very wired feeling. My skin was crazy. Everything was crazy. And I went in for my postpartum checkup, and the doctor did all my blood panels, and the very first little sign of a thyroid issue popped up. So this was back in 2005, roughly. And, I had had my thyroid tested before with all the struggles with my weight and stuff. And so I started thinking, thank God. I think we finally found the problem. It's been my thyroid the whole time. Oh gosh, that's such a misleading rabbit hole. But I I went the Western medicine route. I didn't really know what I didn't know yet. And they put me on Synthyroid. I tried, all these drugs, and they said it was postpartum hypothyroidism, which means what they told me was going to happen was my thyroid was hyperactive, which is why I was losing weight, but it was going to swing, and then I would be hypothyroid, and then it would level out and I'd be fine. And I was like, okay. And I saw an endocrinologist. I did all this. They confirmed all of it. And I let that 6 months go by. And you know what? It did exactly what they said. I went from this shaky, can't hold a pen person to I was tired. My skin was dry. I started gaining weight again. I was depressed. I really was struggling. And just keep in mind, too, I ate the standard American diet. I got my flu vaccines. I did all the things. Well, I was really upset when I had gone back into the doctor close to a year later, and I was doing all the things they said. I was taking the medication, and I felt awful. And they did my blood, and they're like, well, everything's normal. You're good to go. I'd heard that so many times. So, just kind of put a pin in that idea. And I think it's a well known thing now. We go to the doctor and we just get told everything's fine. And, we're just depressed. It's all in your mind, or, exercise more, get outside more, all these things. But you're sitting here going, but I know I'm not okay. So I had done all this. Honestly, I had such a deep depression. I ended up in therapy, and she really recommended that I see a different doctor. And so I did. I switched physicians, and she thought I should get on Seroquel, which, if you don't know, is an SSRI, and it is a tranquilizer. And so I went and saw this doctor, and it was the first. He was a pivot point for me because, number one, his bedside was incredible. He saw physically that what I was experiencing wasn't okay. It wasn't normal. It wasn't what people should experience. And he did prescribe me the medication. But he was like, you know what? I want to retest your thyroid. And he tested the antibodies, which nobody had done. My clinic before just did the standard thyroid panels that Western medicine does, and I'm like, all good to go. He was like, let's test your antibodies. Well, lo and behold, they were way out of whack, way, way, way out of whack. And he's like, this is why your body feels the way it does. He really didn't have all the answers, but at least now I didn't feel like I was insane. I did the medication. I tried more thyroid medication, but honestly, I just kept circling around the same problems. The medication would swing me one way or swing me the other. I never felt right. And I went back, and I finally, I didn't get any new answers, and I finally just thought, I'm done. This is the point where I'm done. And this is where I started my holistic journey and spent hundreds of thousands of dollars out of my own pocket. And this is where hindsight, I'm okay with the lessons, because I'm going to tell you now what I wish I would have known then. So if any of this story resonates with you, I went home, and a neighbor of mine had been on a elimination diet. And I watched her transform, and I thought she was insane. I'm like, you're drinking rice milk, and you're not eating grains, and you're doing all these things. But then I thought, maybe there's something to it. I didn't understand. I turned to Google, and I didn't know what gluten was, but that was what I turned to. And that is what gave me my first hint. I Googled gluten and thyroid. And they're like, hey, guess what? Gluten can create inflammation if you have thyroid issues. And I was like, well, we're getting rid of that. This was 2007. I have been gluten-free since 2007. So I'm knocking on 18 years or so of this journey. That's where it all started. Um, Let me tell you, you had to spend your life savings to eat gluten-free back then. And I didn't know what it was. I didn't understand that it was a protein. I didn't understand all the things it could be in, but I knew that I had to be careful. I lost 13 pounds in 2 weeks. That was inflammation. Just an FYI. That's why I had rheumatoid arthritis, which I did have. That's why I was chronically so inflamed that my life was miserable. Absolutely. I'm 27 years old and I might as well have been 100. So I ate corn chips and meat and rice, and I had no idea what I was doing. But that's where it all started. And from there, it was just a landslide of things. It's kind of like the universe, God, our creator, whatever. My higher self was telling me, you're about to try every single thing under the sun, and we're going to teach you all this stuff. And so that's exactly what it did. It just started to like unravel my world. And so I made some serious changes. I lost a lot of weight. I started to get my life back. And then in 2010, I got heavy metal poisoning. And it is a day I won't forget. I didn't know what happened when it happened, but the whole following year after that day, my life fell apart and it created gut issues, skin issues. I was the thinnest I'd ever been. I literally couldn't eat. I was very, very sick. And so now my next journey unfolded, and I spent a lot of money trying to figure out what was wrong until I finally decided to get tested for the metals, which meant I had to get all the metal out of my face. And so this, let me tell you, this has been a journey.
And can you talk for just a moment? Because I think a lot of, so it's such a fad right now to talk about heavy metal cleanses and parasite cleanses and all these things that are super annoying and super overwhelming. Can you talk about, you said there was like a moment where that kind of happened for you. What was the catalyst to not discovering it, but what was the catalyst in terms of maybe exposure or something that kind of flipped that switch for you so that people can just reflect on their own journey, maybe if they've had similar symptoms. What
Mhm.
was that process or that moment like where you're like, oh no, something's not right here? And then when you kind of look back, what was that? Obviously, you mentioned your feelings, but let's talk a little bit more about that if you could.
Yep, yep. Great question. Um, it bothers me to even talk about it because it's traumatic. But it was so simple. I went to the dentist. I went to the dentist because I had a very large filling that I got done before I was pregnant with my second child. And the dentist had told me, not this dentist that I went to, a different dentist, this should be a crown, but I didn't have the money to pay for it. And he's like, the filling will be fine for a while, but you'll need to get that redone. And so I had just gotten a new job. I finally had dental coverage. I was doing my due diligence. I went to a new dentist. And here's what happened. I needed to get that filling, that amalgam filling, which is an amalgamation of different metals, including mercury, which is soft, right? That's why it fills in and it molds to your tooth. I needed to get that out to get the crown on. They drilled it out without putting a dam in. And they didn't use a lot of water, which meant it got hot. So the vapors from that filling, mercury crosses the blood brain barrier. And so that, you know, um, that went to my brain. And then I swallowed large pieces. And here's the moment I knew. As he's rinsing my mouth and I can feel the chunks going down and he's pulling some out. I I said when I was able, I said, is it okay that I'm swallowing this? Because some of it's going down my throat as you're rinsing. And as Angie, as he's literally holding the like a piece of that filling in a tongs, putting it into a hazardous waste material box, he says to me, the ADA says it's perfectly fine, it's inert. Okay, so I believed him. And the next day, I got so violently sick. Um, I lost my voice for a long time. My face swelled up and my skin started to peel. Like I had a chemical peel. I thought I had strep throat. I hurt so bad. Everything hurt. This was no joke. This wasn't like, I think I might, this is what happened. It was chronic and it was acute, but it starts acute and then becomes chronic. So I thought I just had a virus and I paid $900 for this poisoning. Um, and nobody's accountable to it. For the next year of my life, I started to get all the signs. I no longer could eat dairy. So all the foods that I had eliminated, I had kept out, but dairy was not one of them. I could tolerate dairy. I couldn't anymore. I'd get open lesions on my face if I had just a little bit. I thought it was impetigo. It wasn't, it was a reaction. So here's what happens when you get something like mercury and it goes into your gut and your digestive system. The binding in your intestinal tract should be tight, but it starts to loosen and you get things that pass through there, and your immune system does what your immune system is designed to do. And it says that's dangerous. We need to get it. And the thing about heavy metals is it will start to put it in places that are going to create less of a problem long term. And so, mercury will go into your tissues, into your brain, because if it stays in your bloodstream, it's acute and it's going to kill you. So your body is innately intelligent, like lead will go in your bones, right? So I've been very educated on this. So that was the moment I knew, hindsight. So yes, if you have a mouthful of metal fillings, do not go to the dentist and be like, I want these all out because they're poison. Don't do that. You really need to have a holistic practitioner that can walk you through it. Many
Yes.
years later, I did find that somebody who knew what they were doing, and getting those removed. I followed a very extensive protocol. To do that, it took me a year and I did one quadrant at a time, but it required me flushing with vitamin C, using a lot of binders, supporting every detox pathway that I had, because you get a honeymoon period and then you get very, very sick. And it's so chronic that it creates the autoimmune issues that we're talking about that will last you a lifetime. So I spent 4 years chelating, which means I was slowly purging metals out of my body. It's exhausting, it's painful, it's time consuming, it's costly. It was very worth it. I got my life back. But all the way to now, I still have absolutely no idea how much metal is left in my body, and nor do I think about it, because here's what I learned, hindsight. I had to have that journey, but even though all of that happened, and I know specifically, like the mercury poisoning, like I know what happened. There are moments that you advocate and you fix, but truly, my entire journey from childhood to adulthood, the underlying factor, the reason I was a good host for autoimmune, is because I had so much internal damage. I was carrying anger. My liver wasn't detoxing properly, because that is your seat of anger, right? Each organ in our body has a function. And so when we're carrying things that maybe we don't know about, we're inadvertently clogging our own detox system and creating situations where this kind of stuff will build up and manifest. And again, I wouldn't have known that as a child. That's okay. I got to do this journey to talk to you now about it so that you can think about your life maybe your children's life, and you can decide what solution belongs where. Is this something I need to physically solve? Do I need to clean up my diet? Do I need to focus on getting more hydration or more sunshine or right? But if you're doing all the things like you and I have done, like I am a textbook for all that. I know what's right. I know what's wrong. I know what I need. But why am I still struggling? And this is what costs you money because you got to look at the other side of it. You got to look at your feelings, your emotions that you're carrying, your own, you know, stuff. And if you don't, you're still going to be throwing tons of money in this over here because like we said last recording, there's no supplement for the trauma and the weight of life. So I hindsight, I would have been doing both. I would have been doing more of both, but I didn't know. I didn't know. So that's okay. That's the journey. That's why you and I are like, why do I have to do everything the hard way? And I believe fully I had to do it all the ways that I did it so I can talk about it now and help people get through there faster with more wisdom and more money.
Yes. And you hit the nail on the head, and I'll talk about my journey in a second, but it is such a personal journey. And there are foundational things that you can do, but to your point, you have to address mind, body, and spirit. It's not just the body, it's what the body's been through, what the emotional body's been through, what the spiritual self is still carrying energetically that creates this perfect storm. So that is the case with any disease. And having been a hospice nurse for many years, I can attest to that with seeing so many people, on end of life care for a variety of things. It's all there, and um, you and I have had parallel journeys, different experiences, and kind of different root causes. But it's interesting because the commonality is that, you have to turn inward as well, and you can't out supplement emotional pain. You can't out supplement a bad diet. No other person out there can fix you. You can have helpers along the way, but it's a very personal journey. And so I just want to thank you for sharing in such great detail because I am certain that that's going to resonate for people who are on their own path. And for a lot of people, they'll say, this was the moment the sickness hit. And sometimes, quite often, it's a heavily emotional event that happened. Sometimes, in your case, there was a physical trauma, which was having those fillings removed. And so you can kind of look back and be like, yeah, this was what was happening at the time. Now, what needs to be addressed to heal that? But again, it's comprehensive. It is addressing multiple areas, but it doesn't have to be as daunting as what you and I went through because no one laid this out for us. No one made it as simple as we're going to hopefully make it for you today. So
Yeah. Yeah. And if they did lay it out, there were a lot of books that I owned early on, but these people were deemed quacks in a sense, right? And so they were so discredited and debunked that the emotional tie to a lot of these diseases was just not accepted widely. But look at the world now. I just had that conversation with my youngest son, who's much more science minded than me, about just the impact that a smile, even if you're not feeling happy, can have on your chemical responses in your body. It's the physical connection to the emotion, I think, is what will save people, their sanity. It will tell them where they truly need to look. And obviously, there is a responsibility to our body as well. But you're right. It's that mind, body, soul part that
yeah.
that we're supposed to unlock.
Yeah. And it's so personal. My journey, kind of like yours, a lot of symptoms started when I was little. I was the child who had chronic UTIs. I remember having constipation because I remember getting suppositories and it was terrible. And I suffered from Raynaud's at a very little age. I remember coming in from outside playing where my toes would be dead white, my fingers would be white, and it would hurt. And then they just get super inflamed and really, really itchy. And No one knew what that was. No one understood. It was just a little quirk of Ange, apparently. Um, and, when I look back, a lot of the things I suffered as a child were very much root chakra, a lot of fear, a lot
Mhm.
of feeling unsafe. Um, Fast forward to my teen years, which were really disruptive as well, having lost a parent at a young age, and then shifting into body image issues, controlling what I could control, which was food, and really kind of disassociating from myself because I felt so unsafe and so uncomfortable in my own skin. I never was taught how to cope properly. And I was taught with a lot of fear. There's a lot of religious fear that was put on me as a child, and things that just really kind of made me believe I am less than. I should be full of shame simply by being human. I'm a sinner. All these really just insidious things that people put on children. And it was on me. I also had migraines, a lot of migraines as a child, and, went to the neurologist and did all the things. No answers, fortunately, there were no physical things. But as you know, sometimes you just want a diagnosis because then you understand, like, okay, now I can move forward. And so, like my 20s were, I don't know, I think normal, just 20s in college and kind of learning about myself, getting through college, just large amounts of stress still, but I thought I was doing okay-ish. And then fast forward to, having my children, it was still doing pretty okay. My body was still tolerating a lot of standard American diet, having alcohol, never dealing with my emotions, just
Mhm.
kind of going through the motions of the 9 to 5. Um, had my second son in 2017, and then was back at the gym within a week because that's just what you do when you disassociate. You got to have your copes. And 11 months postpartum, I developed a bladder prolapse. And so, again, root chakra, all these things go back to root chakra. In hindsight, I'm like, oh, that's cute. But it was devastating. It was devastating to have that because I love to run, I loved intense workouts, and I had to come to a screeching halt to heal my body, and I was really kind of pushing through symptoms that I should have stalled out for. Although I will say I was working with a pelvic floor PT and she's like, "You're fine. Keep doing what you're doing. As long as you're not having incontinence, you're fine." That was the worst advice you could give to a woman postpartum,
Mhm.
especially if they're nursing, because their soft tissue is not able to tolerate impact whatsoever. So when the prolapse happened, it was devastating. So I really had to kind of figure out, like, how do I rehab my body? How do I slow down? But mind you, it's taking away my copes, right? The copes I had to kind of navigate life were being slowly pulled away from me. And I should have heeded that as my first line of caution of what was coming, but I didn't because I still needed to learn some experiences and lessons. And fast forward to 2020, I was drinking a terrible amount of wine, which, nurses and healthcare workers are known for our ability to indulge excessively. And um, when COVID hit, it was really the world came to a screeching halt, and I was on the front lines and terrified because, the news made it seem like this was the next Ebola. We didn't know what was happening. I know what I saw in hospice care was tremendously terrible. People were dying, some of the worst deaths I'd ever seen. And there's another part of the population that were saying we were sheep and that COVID wasn't real. And so there was this massive cognitive dissonance of like, but what I'm seeing is very real. This is happening over here. There's this mandatory vaccine that I was very nervous about. And I ended up being a part of the mandates because I was literally told it's your job or the vaccine. And I wasn't given a choice. They don't tell you that you have these ways to do exemptions. They're not going to give you that out that easy. So it was literally, you get it or you leave. And so, that amount of stress really just kind of set my body off. And I think it was the perfect storm again of just tremendous chronic stress and outside, thing like this vaccine, um, and just kind of everything coming to a head. And so in 2020 April, I quit alcohol thinking, all right, like this is going to solve everything, right? Because I was having crippling anxiety to the point that I knew if I didn't make a life change, I would not be here. I was at that level of depression and anxiety. And of course, with alcohol being a depressant, right? It's like pouring gasoline on a fire. Why would you do that to yourself if you're already someone struggling? So to my surprise, it didn't do anything for me. It's like, except for now I got to just, raw dog my emotions. So I was really kind of shocked, like, oh shit, I thought things would get better now. Like, it's not helping. But what it did was it forced me to be with the discomfort of those emotions that I never allowed myself to. And so that was a sort of my kind of holistic journey. Because like I had gone to Western providers, especially for the anxiety, and I was just told this is a lifelong thing. It's a serotonin imbalance. Here's some antidepressants and antipsychotics, and be on your way. And I knew that wasn't the answer, and I wasn't getting better. And
Mhm.
so a friend had recommended a naturopathic provider who um, honestly didn't help. I spent a lot of money on supplements, and they ended up shaming me about having to get the vaccine, which was, there's a very insidious side of holistic care that I'll just call out right now, where it is full crunchy, no room for Western medicine, and then I think there are practitioners that balance things well. The last thing you need to tell somebody who's already in deep emotional distress is that they just destroyed their body by this vaccine that they will never be able to heal from. And so immediately left that person. And it was around that time that I was introduced to subconscious reprogramming. So, i.e., hypnosis. And then, with nothing else to lose, was like, well, I've done everything I can think to do. I eat right. I don't quit. I quit alcohol. I work out. I'm doing all the right things. Like, maybe it's something in my mind. And that was a big aspect of my healing because I learned how to control the mind, that, the mind was basically running the computer program that it was programmed with, but that it was optional. And that was, I would say, 90% of the anxiety healing took place through that work. Now, when that was resolving, then the autoimmunity really started to flare up. It was like one layer of the onion came up. The next one was there. It's again, it felt so unfair to me because I'm like, damn it, I'm doing all the right things. Like, I'm just getting socked left and right with this. So around 2021, I started to lose a tremendous amount of hair. I knew my body, something was not right. But like you said, labs were fine, thyroid was good, everything on the surface, according to Western medicine, was fine. So ended up working with a naturopath who did a test called the Dutch test. They're super expensive. You may or may not need it. For me, it was helpful though, just as like a place to start because it showed me I had tremendously high cortisol, like an astronomically high cortisol, and not fully understanding what that meant because that's not stuff that Western healthcare educates you on as a nurse. Like, we're just not educated on that stuff. Um, but I knew my stress hormones were high. And so this provider had said, hey, probably not a good idea to be having coffee first thing in the morning on an empty stomach and then working out and doing everything you're doing. Cause I was still doing HIIT workouts. I was still running half marathons, pretty much all fasted, but I felt good, or so I thought. What I started to uncover was that the anxiety, air quote, I thought I had was actually chronically high cortisol. So there was an element that was true anxiety, but there was a larger element that was I had had high cortisol for probably many more years than I ever realized. And the workouts I was doing were just not what my body could handle. I could do them because I am a strong-willed baddie, but my body no longer wanted to do that level of activity. It just wasn't good for the hormones. And so then I started to understand hormones. I had super low testosterone, very low progesterone, all these things that were an imbalance because of chronically high cortisol. So, at that point, I'm like, well, how do I solve this? Right? Like, what do I do? I wasn't yet willing to give up the workouts because I just didn't, I felt like I was just giving up so much to try to heal. And again, I'm just raw dog in life. I gave up alcohol. I eat well. I'm doing all these things. Don't take this away from me too. But as I continued to get worse and worse and worse, in spite of taking the right supplements and everything, it really came to a head of like, what you need to do and you have to like let your body properly rest. And so in the midst of this, I'm still doing deep, deep personal work. I'm letting off the gas of the workouts, kind of shifting to more weight training stuff. And my body was still in incredible disarray, meaning, for me, insane amounts of insomnia. I would have the 1 to 2 a.m. waking up time, would struggle to ever get back to sleep, stay asleep. I would never feel rested. I had the wired but tired. I wasn't able to take naps for probably 4 or 5 years. Um, let's see, I felt unwell. I just not something wasn't right, but no one was still kinda connecting totally what the problem was. Well, then had saw another practitioner, and this person had me on all these supplements that ended up totally tanking my thyroid. So, I would again told this practitioner something's not right here. My body doesn't feel good. I'm losing hair by the gobs at this point. Um, they dismissed it, told me to go get some Reiki, and that it wasn't a problem with anything they were doing. Well, I was praying hardcore, like, God, universe, please show me a sign. Like, what am I missing here? And happened to be a day or two later on TikTok, someone had brought up a link between high levels of L-tyrosine, which was a supplement I was on at high doses, and hyperthyroid issues. And I was like, holy crap, that's it. And it was just like this light bulb came off of that's why the thyroid right now is really whacked out. Now, mind you, I had positive antibodies, ANA antibodies, meaning I had autoimmune process in my body, but no one still had diagnosed like what it was specifically. So my prayer was, I hope I'm not going into Hashimoto's. I don't know what's going on. No one's yet done enough testing to help me understand what's actually happening here. So switched to a functional medicine doctor and, they had me just kind of do an anti-inflammatory diet and really just were like, we'll see how you feel. Well, I didn't feel any better at all. I was eating better, on all the right supplements. So I thought, and still was like, something's missing here. And so I asked this person about the AIP diet, which you and I have both done the autoimmune paleo elimination diet. It's a super, super strict, I mean, insanely restrictive diet. And she had basically said, that's not necessary. Like people don't tend to have, food intolerances. You don't have signs of leaky gut. Well, let me tell you, people, we all have leaky gut. If you're in America, you have leaky gut. And that's exactly what Jess was pointing to with the where the walls of your intestines basically, kind of start to separate and all this food passes through and then you have intolerances. So I knew because I was having reactions to things, I was highly inflamed. I knew something wasn't right. So it was actually just spring of last year where I was like, well, like I think I need to do this diet and actually officially quit working out and just see what happens. So I believe it was mid-March last year. So yeah, just about a year ago, where I set my accountability buddies in place. I told people, like, I'm doing this starting Monday. I need you to hold me accountable because this was not going to be an easy diet. Like, it was really, really freaking hard. Um, so within 3 days after detoxing from the dairy, the gluten, all the things, I felt like a new woman. 3 days. I felt astronomically amazing. And what I will say is I did keep coffee. That protocol requires no coffee. I was like, if you're going to take everything from me, like a girl's got to have coffee. My body still healed. So I was on that protocol for 3 months. Around that time, I did start a medicine called low dose naltrexone, which is a really powerful anti-inflammatory medicine. Again, I was just kind of grasping at straws, desperate for something because nothing was making this shift happen. And in quitting the working out, I still walked just gentle walks every day or most days. But I really took the pressure off of what I thought it meant about me, because so much of my identity was on being a runner, being athletic, being able to do these things. I was really proud that I was in my late 30s and I had the stamina and the endurance and killing my body. And so I did 3 months of this autoimmune protocol and my body completely shifted. Now, you're supposed to add one or two foods back in a time, really ideally one at a time every few days. It happened to be we were traveling for the summer and it got really hard. So I just kind of went off the diet a little bit swiftly. Don't do that. It's like it wasn't super helpful. I started to break out in hives because I was having foods that were very clearly upsetting my body. And I started to struggle with what foods were causing the reactions. And so, but regardless, I mean, that made hands down the biggest shift out of the probably $40,000 plus I'd spent on natural care, holistic care, naturopaths, functional health, chiropractic, all of it. The diet alone for me was the biggest deal. And then stopping the workouts. And that was hard. I know so many women right now who I have coached and I've just said, take it from me. Like you think you're doing gentle yoga, that's still too much for your body. You got to stop if your cortisol's that high. because your cortisol needs to lower in order for your body to get rebalanced and for your hormones to balance. So what I noticed in that time from March to June when I was on the diet, my hair loss immediately stopped within a week or two of the diet. The insomnia reversed within 2 or 3 weeks of being on that diet. I was doing a sauna. I bought a sauna blanket as well to help detox, because that is a part of that. As you mentioned, when you have exposures to things, your body puts it in your fat tissues, in your bones, and other places. And so if you start to lose weight, your body's flooded with these toxins. So you need a way to safely detox them. I was also taking some binders to help kind of absorb anything I might be releasing as well. And so I made a lot of progress. And then towards the end of summer, the hair loss came back. Well, the functional medicine doctor who I had been working with had me on some bioidentical hormones. She had, unbeknownst to me, had 10x the dose. So major med error, which threw my body into another tailspin. All of this to say, I got every freaking sign from the universe that, like, bitch, stop outsourcing this. Because I was angry. I'm like, why is every single practitioner like not working out for me? So I was like, am I self-sabotaging? Like, what's going on here? Am I manifesting this? But it was literally the universe, God, bringing me back to me. Like, you can't work this. You have to do the work yourself. And so there was a point this fall, gosh, I think it was like August, September, where I was bawling. I had just been so fed up because I felt so great after this autoimmune diet. I actually redid it again this fall with no results. I had no improvement. I'm like, oh, this is a silver bullet. It's going to help me get back on track. Did nothing for me. I was like, damn it. Like, what now? So I was crying. I looked probably very unhinged. My husband came up from working in his office and was like, are you all right? And I'm like, I'm just sick of this. I'm so sick of this journey. It's been 4.5 years. I feel like I have accomplished so little. And in all of that, I'm just like saying to myself, God, I've been on this journey and I get nothing. Like, I get silence from you about what I need to do. Silence. And I'm just like screaming, all I have is silence. And then it hit me like a 2x4 between the eyes. Silence. Need silence. And so it was this moment of, then I started hysterically laughing because I got it. Because I was like, oh, I haven't been tuning inwards. I've been outsourcing this to everybody else. And I haven't been tuning inwards, truly. Like, I knew I needed to do the AIP diet. That was my intuition and that was spot on. But the next part of my journey, I had no idea. And so in meditation that night, I had received some information on next steps to my healing. And wouldn't you freaking know it, it helped me with the next level. So all of that to say, had I known, I would have tuned in much sooner. Meaning, I'm good with meditation. I do meditation quite often. I have my mindfulness practices, but not necessarily with the intention of, show me what I need to know about this particular topic, right? I was just so in my cerebral mind of reading all the books on autoimmune, seeking out all the practitioners who knew anything about what I was dealing with, long COVID, autoimmune, blah, 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 blah. And like, just doing all of the very logical things, right? Not actually following the intuition, that feminine. And so that was tremendous. And my body made huge strides. Now, in the last 2 months, I've had kind of a flip back into the symptoms again. And I know exactly why. I had pneumonia in January. That was a big stress on my body. I was not eating super great around the holidays. That was a big stress on the body. And then just an excess amount of stress within my personal life that was kind of all coming to a head. The thing is, though, knowing what I know how to get back on track. And so if you're someone who's listening, I'm just going to say this is not medical advice. Anything Jessica and I say are personal to our own journey. And start with the foundations. Food is medicine, food is fuel. I cannot speak enough, and I will scream it from the rooftops about the power of the AIP elimination diet. Now, there are a ton of AIP diets online. The one that you really need to look at is the AIP elimination protocol. It's very bare bones food. It takes away every single inflammatory option you could have. Dairy, gluten, soy, any grains. any refined sugar, caffeine. Again, use your discretion on that. If you need some coffee, I was fine, but it takes away nightshades, legumes. Like there's so much you can't eat, but you do not miss it when your body begins to heal, because nothing feels as good as how clear the energy I had was, how clear my mind was, how fantastic my body felt, and it naturally detoxified. So I would highly consider an AIP diet. As you said as well, you know, nature, sunlight, like grounding in nature is tremendously healing. So getting your outside time, getting a little bit of physical activity, but not too much. Gentle walking if you know that your cortisol's high. And again, for some people, it can be insomnia. Others, it's they never feel awake. They're so tired around the clock. They could sleep
Mm.
23 hours a day, wake up for the 1 hour and still be dragging. That can also be a sign of excessively high cortisol, or the cortisol just tips over and it just like drops off. So just gentle walking can be helpful. Some kind of a mindfulness or meditation practice or therapy, I mean, I think all of it's helpful. But if you have a lot of emotional baggage, find a practitioner that can help with you, with that and the unloading of that, the reframing of that, the healing of that. Um, and, kind of look at some of those pillars and then prioritizing your rest. It doesn't have to be these ten thousands of dollars of biohacking that you and I wasted a lot of money on. There are some things that I'm a big fan of. I really like my sauna blanket. If I had the space right now, I would get a full sauna, but the sauna blanket's great. I like that because the workouts I do, I don't sweat anymore because they're not as intense as they used to be. So sweating is one way we can naturally detox, and a couple times a week is sufficient. You don't have to do it daily. That's going to stress your body out too much. If you're someone too who's doing fasting, don't like it. Be careful. I'll just say be careful. There's a lot of information for women on fasting. If our hormones are in a very delicate space, that can be really stressful for the body. So you have to kind of see how you feel with it. Some of the 12 or 14-hour fasts can be okay, but the extended fast might be a little bit too stressful for your body. So just know that, people praise about that as a way to heal and get into autophagy, and that can be great. But if you're really in an acute phase of healing, that's going to probably be too much for your body. So again, it's not complicated. I met with a friend who's a functional medicine doctor, and I just adore him. And he gave me the best piece of advice a year ago. And he said, I think it was 75 or 80% of people, diet will get them 80% of the way.
Mhm.
And then it's refinement. So dial in your diet, do the AIP elimination diet, and then I would just personally jump right into that. There's ways where they're like, oh, just like tippy toe into it to make it easy. F that crap, rip the bandage off, just jump right in. That's the best way you're going to clean slate with your body and learn what foods actually are tolerated and ones that aren't. Plus, it's going to help you heal your leaky gut too. If you're eliminating that, that's going to help your gut heal. So start there, and then if you still are having problems, then dive a little bit deeper. Again, you and I, a lot of it was emotional, spiritual. So a lot of our healing had to come there. And then if there's still a little bit more where you're not feeling great, maybe you do need some heavy metal testing or to do just a parasite cleanse. That stuff's not going to hurt you to get information on. It's just going to cost you money. But truly, my body healed astronomically from food alone. And so I probably didn't and don't need all the extra testing that they suggest. And that's what really, I think, makes us so overwhelmed, because everybody swears that their thing is the quick fix, their thing is the one thing that you need to get yourself healed. But we forget about the absolute basics. And so, if anything, start at the foundations. If you're still having problems, and you've really dialed in your diet, and if you're being honest with yourself, that's the other thing. People are like, oh, I eat well. Bullshit. You have potato chips before bed every night. Like, eating 90% well isn't enough when you're in that acute of a
Mm.
phase of healing. You've got to be so diligent with it. And no one's going to do it for you. That's the biggest thing, is like you have to be radically accountable and serious about your healing, because we've outsourced this to doctors for so long. And when you begin to understand how the system works to keep you stuck in the system, the
Mm.
biggest thing you can do for your sovereignty and your health is to take back control and not be a victim to a system that is not going to get you better.
Yeah, and I want to add to that too, because I had made a note of that, clean food, clean water, rest, sunshine, healthy relationships. Those are the things that make you turn to the healthy food. And so in everything you're saying, you're so right. Like, but the bigger thing too is if you're finding yourself eating chips on the couch before bed mindlessly, just ask yourself why. What is it that's driving you to that? And if it's, well, I was craving salt, why? What Try to trace it back. That's going to get you to the root. And that's where the healing starts to shift the action. And so, if you're working out a lot, I think, this is a big thing for you. And I was the same. I got rhabdo in 2014 because I just tore so much muscle that I poisoned myself. So I feel you in that. I can do extreme things, but I shouldn't. But again, why?
Yeah.
Why do we go to that level? Why?
And here's the thing, there is a toxic culture for people and women especially that working out's healthy. It's a great outlet for you. Yeah, but if you're an ultra runner and you're dealing with autoimmune and other things, I'm going to ask you why you pour so much energy into running hundreds of miles. What are you running from? Right?
Kingdom.
Because that's also huge, the inability to be present. And that, again, I'm not throwing stones because I was and I'm recovering from being that woman. But that's not healthy. If you find yourself in the gym twice a day, most days a week, that's not healthy. That's not
Right.
normal. And the body doesn't need that, And I see a lot of younger women who are just shaming women for not being those people, but they haven't yet gone through the experiences, and they will. I
Mhm.
sent you a message about that recently,
Yeah.
and it triggered me. Angie's little ego got kind of triggered, but I was also that person 5, 7 years ago. I was like, whatever, hit workouts are not going to damage my hormones. They're not going to whatever. People are like, well, the body's built for this. Back in the day, we were hunter gatherers. We were always going and doing and whatever. Maybe, but we didn't have the toxic food we have. We don't have the toxic water and PFAS we have, the toxic air, the incredible amount of unrelenting stress. We lived in communities back then where we helped each other out. So our bodies are not adapting to the way of life now. So yeah, we could probably do a lot different things. We are also eating of the earth. So
Right.
this is a very different circumstance for us now.
Yeah, and the intention is so different. And I think intention has a lot to do with it. I had read a study, gosh, it was in a book, but I can't remember which book. Um, that they measured, if people went into a hard workout, but they went in happy, they reaped the benefits. If they went in angry or holding a lower vibration, they damaged their body. They found the same with food. And so this is where everything kind of gets kind of muddy, but this is where you get to really kind of go, oh my gosh, there's so much more to this whole experience. So if your intent is to go out for a walk and be in nature, and then you're doing it because you love yourself, because you love experiences, you're probably going to have something very fulfilling happen to you. But if if you do what I did, probably what you did, I'm going to go out and punish myself because I ate a cookie last night and I'm running and I'm just like, you're going to work harder. And you kind of have that mentality. You're probably going to get the damage.
Yeah, and I think,
Same with
you know,
food.
yeah, very much. And towards, I would say I started to have a very healthy relationship with exercise from my mid 20s to mid 30s. But it was very much in the ego. This means something about me. I never did it to punish myself or in relation to how much I ate or drank, at least at that phase. Earlier on in my life, for sure. But
Mhm.
at that point, it was genuinely a healthy outlet. But what I noticed was I was just trading addictions. The energy I was no longer funneling into this stuff over here. I funneled into my workouts, and I never felt the intentions were poor or negative. But again, in hindsight, I understand it was because I just wasn't able to be still. And I will tell you, and I've told my clients this who are struggling with weight, and man, they are like me to a T because they're just not willing to hear it yet. And that's okay. But when I took off from working out that hard, my body thanked me so much. I've always been, I shouldn't say always, since recovering from eating disorders in my 20s, my body composition's been pretty similar. So once it kind of reached its homeostasis again, my body composition's been pretty similar, meaning this is just Angie's kind of natural set point weight. So when I gave up the intense running and hit workouts, this didn't change that much, which surprised the heck out of me because I thought I would gain weight, I would have a lot more fat, I would feel not as good. I feel even better. I don't feel anxiety anymore because I don't have high cortisol like I did. Um, so if that's a fear too, yes, all of our bodies and chemistries are different, but your body is telling you what it needs, and I had a client recently say, "I just wanna rest when I get home from work, and I have so much I need to do." And I'm like, "Listen to that. Listen to that. Your body's telling you." And they're not. They're overriding it, and that's gonna be their journey as a coach and as a person who's been there. I can bring a person to the solution, but they're not gonna see it until they're ready. And they're gonna be like me, they're gonna hit every single wall and door until finally they are crying in a corner in surrender to the universe of, "Show me what I'm missing." And then you're like, "Oh, yeah, that was there the whole time. I just didn't wanna see it."
Yeah, we all do
There's
it.
you too.
It's
So
fine. I mean, it's your journey and we all do it. And your clients do it, my clients do it. And if you're listening to this and you go to that next level and you do these different things, and then people ask, what are you doing? And then you tell them, and then they hit the walls. That's the name of the game. And that's okay. We each have our own journey, but maybe there's something in here that will help you just kind of say, okay, I'm ready to do what's uncomfortable and save myself money
yes,
and
and
time.
again, none of this, I don't want any of this to ever be to shame somebody who's not ready for change, right? Because I was that person, so I will never throw stones because I deeply get it, and yet being on the other side, this is stuff I wish I could have received earlier. But like you said, I had to go through the journey because it taught me a lot too that I can now teach other people who are ready for it. And so if anything in here resonates, just be with that. Be with it. Consider if it's right for you. And your subconscious is going to give you some resistance if it's a change because it likes the familiar comfort zone. So don't let discomfort or resistance stop you. There's a great book called You Are the Mountain, or I think The Mountain is You, something like that. Um, it's all about self-sabotage and why our brains do that. It's to keep us safe. And there's some other great books if you ever need resources. I have a ton, but it just helps understand, what our brains are doing, but how to overcome it in a way that feels a little bit easier. Because when you can understand the brain's operations, it feels a little less personal. Like, oh, the brain's just doing what the brain does, no big deal. So, but your journey is going to be different than Jessica's and I's, meaning, the roads you're going to take are going to be different for the purpose that you need to and for the lessons and life experiences you want to have or are here to have. So, um, again, none of this is medical advice. If at any point you want us to expand more on these topics, I think a great topic for another podcast would be all the biohacks we've tried, which ones are great, which ones are crap,
Yeah.
because it's also a
Yeah.
hot topic for a lot of people. There's so much on the market. But anyways, so yeah, reach out with any questions as always. And thank you for taking the time. This is a really special episode, and I think one that's just very personal given our own journeys. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. Same here. Thanks, guys. And we'll see you next time.